You don't understand the clause at all. Jackson Hale's voice cut through the marble boardroom, sharp, deliberate, echoing off the high ceilings like a hammer striking glass. The dozen executives froze mid-breath, papers and pens poised in the tense silence, their eyes darting between each other in disbelief. Maya Williams, standing near the polished water tray, adjusted her apron slightly, a calm shadow among the panic of tailored suits. Her dark eyes scanned the document on the long oak table, flicking across lines in Arabic that danced like a code only she could read. The light from the chandelier shimmered off the crystal glasses, reflecting in the steel pens and the polished shoes, but Maya's focus never wavered. Jackson leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a faint smirk of superiority on his face, confident that this was just another room of nodding subordinates who would pretend to understand and agree. Maya's heartbeat quickened, a soft rhythm hidden beneath her composed exterior, yet steady enough to feel like a drum of courage in her chest. She took a measured breath, letting the silence expand, letting the weight of anticipation settle on every person present. If you proceed with this wording, your company assumes the full liability, she said in precise Arabic, voice calm but commanding, carrying authority that cut through the tension like a beam of light. Heads turned sharply, some glancing at Jackson for confirmation, others at Maya, with growing disbelief. Jackson's pen hovered midair, a frozen gesture that captured the sudden halt in the room's tempo, the hum of the air conditioning and the soft shuffle of papers, now the only audible background to a moment suspended in time. Maya's hands rested lightly on the edge of the tray, fingertips brushing the silver, reflecting her quiet steadiness. She explained the clause, highlighting subtle shifts in language that could mean millions lost or saved, and each word landed with clarity, precision, and a weight that made the room collectively exhale without sound. Jackson's eyebrows knitted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features as he leaned forward, eyes narrowing at Maya's steady gaze. The assistants shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves, the earlier smirk on Jackson's face replaced by a tension that tightened the room's atmosphere like a drawn wire. Maya maintained eye contact. The calm of her posture contrasted with the shock rippling through the boardroom. The chandelier reflected in her eyes, subtle flickers of light capturing the steel of her resolve. Jackson swallowed, jaw tightening, realizing for the first time in his career that he had misjudged the person standing before him solely because of her uniform and the role society had assigned her. The silence stretched, thick and tangible, the air vibrating with unspoken acknowledgment of intellect and courage. Maya concluded her explanation, and for a brief heartbeat, the room collectively held its breath, waiting for Jackson's response. His eyes met hers fully now, seeing not just a maid, not just a server of water and coffee, but someone who carried knowledge and authority beyond the hierarchy imposed by titles or wealth. Every executive leaned in slightly, some nodding subtly, some frozen, caught between disbelief and respect. Maya's voice, calm, steady, resonant, lingered as she finished, the echoes of her words filling the space, leaving a roomful of the most powerful people suddenly quiet, reflective, and aware that a simple apron could never define true capability. The moment held, suspended, as if time itself had paused to measure the gravity of the exchange. Jackson's hand still poised over the contract, his mind racing with the realization that the balance of power in that room had quietly shifted, that the true authority often resided in knowledge, courage, and the willingness to speak even when the world expected silence. And as the chandelier's light shimmered across the polished floor, Maya straightened, lifted her chin slightly, and gave the faintest nod toward the contract, leaving the ending unresolved, the tension unresolved, a silent invitation to witness the consequences of intellect, poise, and courage beyond the surface of appearances. The room remained suspended in silence for several long moments, the polished marble floors reflecting the subtle movements of each executive, their expressions a mixture of disbelief, curiosity, and reluctant respect. Maya Williams shifted slightly on her feet, hands lightly brushing the edges of the silver tray, the faint scent of citrus polish in the air mixing with the soft hum of the air conditioning. Her eyes never left the contract, tracing the lines she had memorized, each word carrying potential consequences for the company. Yet she remained calm, composed, exuding quiet authority that belied her position as a maid. Jackson Hale finally lowered his hand, pen poised midair, and leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he attempted to reconcile the unexpected revelation with his own assumptions. The assistants and junior executives exchanged glances, some leaning subtly closer to catch any further words, others biting their lips to suppress a gasp. Maya took a deliberate step closer to the table, her posture straight, shoulders back, her dark hair catching the ambient light, giving her an almost ethereal presence amid the tension of the room. She continued to articulate, in measured, precise English, the implications of the clause, comparing the risks with the corporate statutes, and demonstrating with clear logic how the agreement could backfire catastrophically if signed without revision. Jackson's gaze flicked between her and the contract, his brow furrowed, jaw tightening as he processed the accuracy of her observations. The room felt as if time had slowed, the soft scratch of pens on paper, the faint clink of coffee cups on saucers, and the rustle of crisp papers marking each heartbeat as the tension accumulated. Some executives shifted in their chairs, leaning forward with rapt attention, while others instinctively straightened, aware that they were witnessing an extraordinary demonstration of insight and courage. Maya's voice remained calm but firm, each word precise, punctuated with subtle inflections that highlighted the severity of potential liabilities. She referenced prior cases, legal precedents, and financial ramifications, all without raising her tone or demanding recognition, yet commanding respect effortlessly. Jackson Hale exhaled slowly, the sound almost imperceptible, and ran a hand through his hair, the first crack in his confident facade showing as he silently acknowledged that her analysis was not only accurate but critical. He shifted in his chair, leaning back slightly, and for a moment, the smirk of superiority vanished, replaced by a contemplation that was both introspective and tense. The boardroom transformed from a stage of hierarchy into a space where knowledge had equalized the power dynamics. Maya noticed the subtle change, her own heart steady, pulse measured, as she sensed the silent acknowledgment from Jackson, an unspoken recognition of her intellect and professionalism. The chandelier lights shimmered softly, casting elongated shadows on the floor, mirroring the gradual shift in the room's energy, the weight of past assumptions lifting slowly as everyone processed the reality of what had just occurred. The executives who had earlier assumed compliance or ignorance now listened intently, absorbing every clarification, every nuance, every carefully chosen phrase that Maya had delivered with unwavering confidence. Jackson's eyes softened slightly, a flicker of admiration mingled with the remnants of surprise, as he considered how quickly he had misjudged her based solely on appearance and role. Maya concluded her explanation, resting her hands lightly on the table, and the room held its collective breath, each individual acutely aware of the change in atmosphere, the subtle rebalancing of respect and authority that had just unfolded. The sound of the air conditioning hummed softly in the background, a reminder of the quiet tension that still lingered, while the natural light through the tall windows illuminated Maya's calm expression, highlighting the strength and clarity in her dark eyes. Jackson finally nodded, barely perceptibly, his lips pressed into a thin line, signaling acknowledgment without words, a silent concession that the knowledge, integrity, and composure of one individual could command the attention and respect of even the most powerful and entrenched figures. The subtle shift in body language, the softened postures, and the measured glances exchanged among the executives confirmed that a moment of genuine recognition had passed, leaving the room transformed, the hierarchy momentarily suspended, and Maya Williams standing as a quiet fulcrum of insight, competence, and courage. The implications of her intervention lingering in the space like an unspoken promise of further revelations yet to unfold, the outcome unresolved and the tension intact, inviting the continuation of events beyond the walls of the boardroom. Jackson Hale leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing as he revisited the contract on the polished oak table, the subtle reflection of the chandelier glinting off his cufflinks, his mind racing to process the unexpected turn of events. Maya Williams remained standing near the tray, posture poised, her dark eyes unwavering as she subtly observed each reaction in the room, noticing the slight stiffening of shoulders, the exchanged glances, and the quiet acknowledgments that her presence had forced. The air was thick, almost tangible, each breath weighted with anticipation and the unspoken realization that a simple uniform could not define capability or intellect. Jackson ran a hand over his forehead, exhaling slowly, the sound barely audible over the faint hum of the air conditioning, yet it carried the tension of a man confronting his assumptions and pride. Maya's voice, measured and clear, resumed explanation of the legal ramifications, drawing attention to precedents and potential liabilities, each phrase carefully chosen to illuminate the risks without a trace of condescension. The executives leaned in, some shifting their weight in their chairs, trying to reconcile their prior expectations with the evidence being laid out in front of them. Maya's calm composure contrasted sharply with the fluttering uncertainty of the room, her hands resting lightly on the silver tray, reflecting subtle glints of light that seemed to emphasize the quiet authority she radiated. Jackson's eyes flicked repeatedly between her and the contract, lips pressed into a thin line as he mentally traced the scenario Maya had described, the implications of each clause settling with deliberate weight. The subtle scratches of pens on paper, the soft shuffle of feet on the marble floor, and the faint clicking of a laptop keyboard punctuated the tense atmosphere, but none of it interrupted Maya's rhythm or presence. She stepped slightly closer, her dark eyes catching the light in a way that made her small stature seem commanding, her voice remaining steady as she highlighted the finer points of compliance and risk assessment, the room hanging on every word. Jackson finally raised a finger, as if to interject, but paused, absorbing the precision and confidence in her analysis, the calculated logic that left little room for error or doubt. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, acknowledging that an unexpected balance of power had emerged, and that true authority could reside in knowledge, preparation, and the courage to speak at the right moment. Maya concluded with a final clarification, resting her hands on the edge of the table, shoulders squared, exuding a quiet but undeniable strength that drew the attention and respect of everyone present. Jackson tilted his head slightly, a subtle nod passing across his face, a silent recognition of her intellect and the courage it took to present it under such scrutiny. The executives shifted again, the tension easing slightly as understanding settled in, though the weight of the lesson remained, palpable in the quiet resonance of the room. The marble floors glimmered under the chandelier lights, reflecting the transformation in energy as respect replaced disbelief, acknowledgment replaced presumption, and the quiet authority of one individual reshaped the dynamics of the boardroom. Jackson's hand hovered for a moment above the papers, a silent concession to the clarity and accuracy of Maya's intervention, and then he slowly lowered it, exhaling deeply, eyes meeting hers with a mixture of admiration and contemplation. The room remained still, the subtle changes in posture, gaze, and expression capturing a shared understanding that the moment had shifted something fundamental. Maya remained poised, aware of the gravity of the situation, her calm demeanor anchoring the room as the implications of her insights settled over each executive. And as the chandelier lights glinted off the polished surfaces, the balance of respect, authority, and recognition had quietly realigned, leaving a lingering sense of anticipation for the consequences and outcomes that would unfold beyond this moment. A promise of revelations yet to come, and a silent invitation to witness the continuation of this unfolding story. Jackson Hale finally spoke, his voice measured, controlled, but carrying a weight that rippled through the room. Maya, walk me through this clause one more time. And the simple request hung in the air like a challenge and acknowledgment all at once. Maya Williams nodded subtly, stepping closer to the long table, her dark eyes reflecting the light from the tall windows as she traced her fingers lightly along the margin of the contract, pointing out critical phrases, subtle legal nuances, and potential points of failure with precision and clarity. The executives leaned forward, pens paused in midair, each pair of eyes fixed on her movements, the faint rustle of papers and the gentle clink of glass punctuating the otherwise thick, silent tension. Jackson's posture shifted imperceptibly, his shoulders loosening as he absorbed the accuracy of her insights, the calculated logic illuminating risks that had previously gone unnoticed, and the boardroom seemed to shrink around the intensity of this single interaction. Maya's tone was calm, yet authoritative, the cadence of her explanation rhythmic, steady, and deliberate, emphasizing points with slight inflections that drew attention without demanding it, creating a subtle command over the space and the attention of those within it. The light from the chandelier caught her hair, casting flickers across her focused expression, enhancing the sense of quiet authority she held in that moment, and every subtle gesture. The lift of a finger, the tilt of her head, the placement of her hands on the silver tray, communicated competence, composure, and confidence. Jackson's eyes followed her movements intently, tracing each observation, each correction, realizing that the depth of her knowledge and the clarity of her thought were far beyond what anyone had expected from someone in her role. The assistants exchanged glances, some nodding subtly, others still wide-eyed, and the murmurs that might have broken the tension were swallowed by the authority radiating from Maya, leaving the room suspended in a moment of collective recognition. As she completed her detailed walkthrough, Maya stepped back slightly, maintaining eye contact with Jackson, and the room held its collective breath, the faint hum of the air conditioning and the soft tapping of keyboards providing a subtle underscore to the unfolding shift in perception and power. Jackson exhaled, a deep, deliberate sound, letting the realization sink in that his assumptions had been flawed, that a uniform and a title did not encompass the entirety of capability, and that true understanding and competence could emerge from the most unexpected places. The executives relaxed incrementally, their posture softening as the respect for Maya became tangible, shifting the energy in the room from tension and disbelief to quiet acknowledgment. Maya's presence remained steady, a fulcrum of calm and insight amidst the subtle transformations of hierarchy and perception, her eyes bright but composed, signaling awareness of the impact her words had created without needing affirmation. Jackson slowly lowered his pen, allowing it to rest gently on the table, and for the first time, the subtle smile of acknowledgment appeared, his lips curving just slightly as he met Maya's gaze with recognition, understanding, and a hint of respect that had not existed minutes before. The room, once dominated by assumed authority and rigid hierarchy, had been realigned by clarity, knowledge, and composure, and as Maya straightened fully, the light catching her expression, the boardroom seemed poised on the edge of transformation, anticipation lingering in the air, leaving a sense that the consequences of this exchange were far from complete and that the full scope of her impact was only beginning to unfold. The subtle tension of expectation carrying forward beyond the immediate walls and time of the meeting. The room had settled into an almost tangible stillness, the high ceilings and reflective surfaces amplifying the weight of the unspoken recognition that hung between Jackson Hale and Maya Williams, each executive aware that the balance of authority had subtly shifted without a single word of concession. Maya's posture remained impeccable, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the polished oak table, fingertips brushing the smooth surface with deliberate care as she measured the reactions of those around her, noting the flicker of eyebrows, the quiet intake of breath, and the subtle lean forward of some, all indicating an acknowledgment of her insight and calm authority. Jackson's gaze, once sharp and dismissive, now lingered on her with a mixture of contemplation and respect, his lips pressed in a thin line as he internally retraced every detail she had pointed out, assessing the implications not only for the immediate contract but for the broader landscape of responsibility and risk that it encompassed. The assistants and junior executives, previously poised to react on instinct or hierarchy, now observed with careful attention, their movements slowed, their whispers replaced by the silent absorption of every detail Maya presented, the cadence of her speech guiding their focus and understanding. The soft ambient light from the floor-to-ceiling windows highlighted the subtle expressions on faces, the delicate interplay of shadows emphasizing the gravity and precision of her analysis, while the faint hum of the air conditioning and the quiet tapping of pens punctuated the concentrated atmosphere, a rhythm that underscored the significance of what was unfolding. Maya's voice, even and precise, navigated through the dense language of corporate liability, clarifying terms and potential outcomes, each point anchored by examples from prior cases, yet delivered with an unassuming tone that communicated expertise without arrogance, allowing the room to comprehend both the seriousness and the subtlety of the matter. Jackson shifted slightly in his chair, hands folded, eyes narrowing as he traced each argument in his mind. The calculated logic presented by Maya revealing vulnerabilities and overlooked contingencies he had previously dismissed, the acknowledgment of her competence a quiet but profound concession. The executive's body language evolved gradually, postures easing from tense rigidity to thoughtful attentiveness, subtle nods exchanged between colleagues conveying agreement and recognition without breaking the spell of concentrated respect that Maya had fostered. The ambient sounds, the shuffle of papers, the distant faint clack of a keyboard, the occasional tap of a pen, served to punctuate the silence rather than disrupt it, each sound absorbed into the collective focus on Maya's poised explanations and the clarity with which she navigated complex details. Jackson's eyes traced the lines of the contract once more, the pen now resting gently on the table, his internal dialogue processing the comprehensive understanding that Maya had imparted, and he leaned back slowly, exhaling a controlled, almost imperceptible breath that carried the tension of realization, a subtle shift in the energy of the room signaling the recognition of intellect and authority emerging from the least expected place. Maya straightened slightly, acknowledging the unspoken deference, her presence commanding yet unobtrusive, the calm in her expression resonating throughout the room as the executives recalibrated their assumptions, their silent observation reinforcing the impact of knowledge and composure over title or attire. The chandelier lights glinted off polished surfaces, casting soft reflections that mirrored the nuanced acknowledgment taking place, while Jackson allowed a subtle nod of consideration to pass, a silent communication of respect and awareness that the weight of authority had shifted in a manner measured, precise, and undeniable. Every subtle gesture, Maya's quiet step back, the careful placement of her hands, the unbroken eye contact, and the measured cadence of her words, reinforced the transformation, establishing a new equilibrium in which intellect and clarity had claimed precedence over presumption and hierarchy, leaving a lingering sense that the events set in motion would have consequences beyond the immediate room, and that the unfolding narrative of competence, courage, and quiet influence was only beginning to reveal its scope and potential impact, the subtle tension of expectation stretching beyond the immediate confines of the boardroom and into the larger unfolding story. The tension in the boardroom had shifted subtly, the rigid hierarchy softened by the clarity and confidence Maya Williams had brought to the table, and as she stood near the polished oak surface, her hands lightly resting on the edge, she allowed herself a measured pause, scanning the reactions of those around her. Jackson Hale, seated at the head of the table, leaned slightly forward, his fingers tapping a slow rhythm against the smooth surface, eyes tracing the lines of the contract while also observing Maya with a growing recognition that the assumptions he had carried into the room were incomplete. The executives, previously poised to respond based on rank and expectation, now leaned forward in unison, the atmosphere charged with silent anticipation, their subtle movements reflecting a recalibration of understanding and respect. Maya's dark eyes, calm yet piercing, met Jackson's, a quiet acknowledgment passing between them, the unspoken realization that knowledge and preparation could command attention beyond title or attire. She continued, explaining the nuances of the clause with a rhythm that drew the listeners in, her voice steady, measured, resonant with authority without overt assertion, highlighting potential outcomes and illustrating complex legal implications with precision and clarity. The light from the floor to ceiling windows caught the subtle gestures of her hands, tracing the margins and corners of the contract, each movement purposeful, emphasizing key points and drawing the eyes of the room toward the evidence she had meticulously prepared. Jackson's posture shifted imperceptibly, a softening of the shoulders and a tilt of the head as he absorbed the depth of her insight, the subtle cadence of her words reshaping the perception of what authority meant in that space. The room's silence was punctuated only by faint ambient sounds, the soft shuffle of papers, the click of a pen, the muted hum of the air conditioning. But the weight of the moment was evident in the collective attention, the subtle nods, the shifting glances, the quiet intake of breath. Maya's careful pacing, the deliberate clarity in her explanations, the unwavering eye contact, and the calm assertiveness of her presence created an environment in which the complexity of the contract was illuminated, vulnerabilities exposed, and the room collectively understood that the intelligence and poise she displayed could not be overlooked. Jackson finally exhaled, a slow, deliberate release of breath that seemed to acknowledge the magnitude of her contribution, the previously unchallenged authority of the room yielding, if only slightly, to the quiet power of insight and preparation. The executives relaxed incrementally, some leaning back in their chairs, others maintaining posture but with softened expressions, a subtle acknowledgment that the dynamics had changed, that a new equilibrium had been established. Maya stepped back slightly, hands still lightly touching the polished surface, a poised observer as the realization settled, her calm presence reinforcing the authority she had earned without confrontation. The soft reflections of the chandelier danced across the marble floor, echoing the subtle shift in energy, the tension giving way to respect and attentive focus, the quiet power of knowledge and composure holding sway. Jackson's gaze lingered on her, the faintest nod acknowledging her expertise and foresight, and in that pause, the room felt suspended, the implications of the contract clear, the authority realigned, and the moment, rich with silent understanding, promised further developments beyond the immediate exchange. Every subtle detail, the measured gestures, the precise articulation of points, the controlled intonation, and the unwavering calm, contributed to a transformation in perception, a recalibration of respect, and the unfolding awareness that the influence of one individual, prepared and confident, could quietly reshape the dynamics of even the most rigidly structured space, leaving the room poised on the edge of realization and anticipation for what would follow. Jackson Hale shifted in his seat, the chair creaking softly against the marble floor, his eyes tracing the words on the contract once more, while also lingering on Maya Williams, whose calm presence seemed to anchor the entire room. Her hands rested lightly on the polished oak table, fingers brushing the edge in deliberate, subtle movements as she maintained eye contact with him, conveying assurance without demanding attention. The executives around the room exchanged glances, their earlier tension giving way to quiet acknowledgment, subtle nods, and thoughtful expressions, as if the room itself was holding its breath in recognition of the authority she had quietly established. Maya spoke again, her voice steady and deliberate, articulating potential implications and alternate scenarios, each word measured and clear, drawing attention to details that had been overlooked, her explanations layered with precision and insight that captivated every listener without raising the volume or breaking the composed rhythm she maintained. The sunlight filtering through the tall windows reflected off the chandelier crystals, scattering soft glimmers across the polished surfaces, highlighting the careful movements of Maya's hands and the intensity in her eyes as she guided the room through the nuances of the contract. Jackson's shoulders relaxed slightly, a subtle exhale escaping him, acknowledging the accuracy and depth of her observations, the recognition passing silently between them as he absorbed the implications of her analysis. The assistants shifted in their chairs, leaning in, pens paused, laptops idle, the soft scratch of papers and occasional clicks providing a gentle underscore to the concentrated focus enveloping the room. Maya's posture remained impeccable, her presence commanding attention not through volume or force but through clarity, confidence, and quiet authority, her voice a steady cadence that led the executives through the intricate legal landscape with undeniable competence. Jackson tapped his fingers lightly on the table, a rhythm that mirrored his racing thoughts as he contemplated the potential consequences and the necessity of her insights, his expression shifting from initial surprise to cautious respect and contemplation. The executives' reactions evolved, subtle changes in posture and expressions conveying acknowledgment, understanding, and a grudging admiration, their collective body language reinforcing the impact of Maya's calm yet precise communication. The room felt suspended in a moment of concentrated attention, the soft ambient sounds, the hum of the air conditioning, the faint rustle of papers, the gentle clink of glasses, punctuating the silence without diminishing the intensity of focus. Maya concluded her explanations with careful emphasis on the most critical points, stepping back slightly, shoulders squared, eyes meeting Jackson's with unwavering confidence, the quiet strength of her presence commanding respect and attention. Jackson exhaled again, longer this time, his eyes softening as he considered the implications, both immediate and long-term, and the subtle shift in the dynamics of the room became evident in the relaxed postures, thoughtful glances, and quiet nods of the executives. The sunlight continued to shimmer across the polished floors, capturing the interplay of reflection and shadow, the delicate nuances of attention, respect, and acknowledgment settling over the room, creating a space where intellect, preparation, and composure had quietly recalibrated the balance of perceived authority. Maya remained poised, her voice having guided the room through complexity with precision and confidence, and as she straightened fully, the ambient light highlighted her composed expression, the soft glimmer in her eyes reflecting both clarity and quiet power, leaving the boardroom suspended in a moment of reflection, realization, and anticipation for the unfolding consequences beyond the immediate discussion. The boardroom had grown still, the only sounds coming from the soft shuffle of papers and the distant hum of the air conditioning, as if the entire space had collectively paused to absorb the gravity of the moment. Maya Williams remained near the polished oak table, shoulders squared, dark eyes focused, her hands resting lightly on the edge as she allowed the room to process the depth of her insights. Jackson Hale leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced, eyes scanning the contract once more while also flicking toward Maya, the weight of realization settling heavily on his face. The executives, who moments before had expected routine discussion and compliance, now absorbed the unexpected clarity she provided, their posture softening, pens pausing in midair, and heads tilting in quiet attention. Maya's calm voice broke the silence again, articulating subtle distinctions, contingencies, and potential outcomes with a precision that carried authority beyond her role, each phrase deliberate, measured, and resonant, commanding focus without demand. The sunlight through the tall windows caught the faint glimmer in her hair and reflected off the polished floor, emphasizing the quiet strength of her presence, as she traced her finger along the margins to highlight key points, drawing eyes naturally to the details she had prepared. Jackson shifted slightly, leaning forward, a subtle exhale escaping as he processed the thoroughness and accuracy of her observations, the unspoken acknowledgment passing between them, a quiet recognition of intellect and composure that contrasted with previous assumptions. The room responded in kind, subtle nods, soft shifts in posture, and attentive glances conveying respect and engagement, each executive unconsciously calibrating to the authority Maya had established without confrontation. Her steady cadence, careful articulation, and poised movements guided the room through the complex landscape of the contract, exposing potential pitfalls and overlooked risks while maintaining an aura of calm command. The faint sounds of typing, paper rustling, and glass tapping underscored the concentration, but did not intrude on the rhythm of comprehension and reflection that had settled over the group. Jackson's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger but in contemplation, as he realized the breadth of Maya's insight and the implications for the company, his prior assumptions dissipating like fog in the clarity of her analysis. The executives absorbed each point, some leaning closer, others straightening, their expressions shifting from surprise to respect, the subtle dynamics of power and recognition rearranging themselves silently in the space. Maya's posture remained impeccable, her gaze unwavering, signaling confidence and assurance, her presence commanding attention while remaining unobtrusive, a fulcrum of composure and knowledge. The sunlight continued to shimmer across the room, accentuating the interplay of light and shadow on the polished surfaces, reflecting the transformation of perception and energy as the executives recalibrated their understanding of authority and capability. Jackson finally exhaled, longer this time, fingers unclasping as he leaned slightly forward, eyes meeting Maya's in a shared, quiet acknowledgment of competence, preparation, and the courage to speak with clarity and precision. The room, once dominated by rigid hierarchy and assumption, now felt balanced in a way that was almost imperceptible, authority and respect flowing subtly from insight and presence rather than title or appearance. And Maya, standing poised, allowed the silence to settle, her calm determination establishing a quiet but undeniable command over the boardroom, leaving a lingering sense of anticipation for the consequences and developments that would follow beyond this suspended moment. The energy in the space, a delicate mixture of reflection, respect, and expectation for the unfolding story that was only beginning to reveal its full impact. Jackson Hale's gaze lingered on Maya Williams as the final points of her analysis settled over the boardroom, his mind processing both the intricacy of her insight and the quiet confidence with which she had delivered it. The executives, previously poised for routine compliance, now sat in attentive stillness, the subtle shift in the atmosphere palpable, as if the entire room were collectively holding its breath in acknowledgment of the authority Maya had established. Her hands rested lightly on the edge of the polished oak table, fingers tracing gentle, deliberate lines along the margin of the contract, each movement purposeful, guiding attention to critical details without drawing overt notice. The sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows glinted off the chandelier crystals, scattering soft reflections across the marble floor, emphasizing the poise and composure that defined her presence. Jackson exhaled slowly, his shoulders relaxing incrementally as the full magnitude of her insight became clear, a subtle nod acknowledging not only her understanding of the material, but the courage it took to present it under such scrutiny. The room remained quiet, save for the faint shuffle of papers and the soft hum of the air conditioning, as every executive absorbed the clarity and precision of her perspective, their body language slowly evolving from rigid expectation to thoughtful attention, leaning forward to follow her words, subtle glances exchanged conveying shared recognition of the transformation in authority. Maya's voice remained calm and measured, articulating contingencies, potential outcomes, and subtle nuances of the clause, each sentence delivered with a rhythm that drew the room in, commanding attention without the need for force or volume. Jackson's eyes followed every gesture, noting the slight lift of a finger, the tilt of her head, the quiet emphasis on key points, realizing how effortlessly she had shifted the perception of competence in the room, the authority that had seemed predetermined by rank now balanced by knowledge and composure. The executives responded in kind, subtle nods, small shifts in posture, and thoughtful expressions conveying the recognition that intellect and preparation could exert influence equal to or greater than formal title. Maya's calm presence continued to anchor the room, her dark eyes catching the light, reflecting focus, awareness, and quiet power, and the space felt suspended in a moment of collective realization, as though time itself had paused to honor the clarity and precision she brought. Jackson leaned back slightly, hand resting on the table, pen poised but idle, exhaling. In a measured rhythm that mirrored the slow acknowledgment forming across the room, the subtle changes in posture, attention, and expression signaling the recalibration of respect and understanding among the executives. The interplay of sunlight, reflective surfaces, and the soft glimmer of chandelier crystals highlighted each micro-movement, each deliberate gesture, creating a cinematic tableau of quiet authority and thoughtful engagement. Maya straightened fully, allowing the room to take in the entirety of her presence, poised and unwavering, her composure and insight shaping the dynamics in a subtle but undeniable way, the executive's eyes following every motion, internalizing the implications of her analysis, and the quiet acknowledgement that competence and courage could emerge from unexpected places settled firmly into the atmosphere, leaving the boardroom balanced between recognition, anticipation, and the lingering sense that the story unfolding within these walls was far from complete, that further developments and consequences would follow, guided by the clarity, intelligence, and composed authority of Maya Williams. The room remained suspended in the quiet aftermath of Maya Williams' detailed analysis, a palpable shift in the air, signaling a subtle yet profound change in perception and authority. Jackson Hale leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the polished oak table, his eyes tracing the contract once more, pausing on each phrase that Maya had highlighted, the precision of her observations echoing in his mind like a clarion call to reconsider every assumption he had made. The executives around him sat in attentive stillness, their initial surprise giving way to a careful, reflective focus, pens hovering midair, heads tilted slightly, absorbing the weight of insight that had emerged from the least expected source. Maya's posture remained poised, shoulders squared, her hands resting gently on the table, a subtle shift in her stance marking the quiet confidence that underpinned her every word. She spoke again, her voice calm and deliberate, articulating contingencies, clarifying legal implications, and exploring potential outcomes with a clarity that commanded attention without demanding it, each phrase drawing the room further into the depth of her expertise. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows highlighted the glint of the chandelier on the polished marble floors and the subtle sheen of Maya's hair, reinforcing the composed authority she carried, while Jackson's eyes softened as he processed the gravity of the points she had raised, the acknowledgment unspoken but evident in the slight nod that crossed his features. The assistants and junior executives leaned forward imperceptibly, the quiet hum of the room underscoring the weight of the moment, the room itself seeming to hold its breath in recognition of the unexpected authority that knowledge and composure could wield. Maya's gaze remained steady, scanning faces, noting reactions, subtle shifts, and micro-expressions that revealed understanding and respect. The quiet authority she exuded creating a gravitational pull of attention and focus. Jackson's hands moved slightly, adjusting the pen in his grip, a deliberate gesture as he mentally traced the implications of her analysis, absorbing both the immediate and long-term consequences. The realization that he had underestimated the value of preparation and insight now clearly settling in. The executive's body language evolved subtly, some inclining forward, some shifting in their chairs, subtle nods exchanged conveying agreement and acknowledgment. The transformation in the room's energy both gradual and unmistakable. Maya concluded a final point, stepping back just slightly, maintaining direct eye contact with Jackson, her calm assurance radiating, and the space between them felt charged with a quiet recognition of competence and integrity. The sunlight reflected off the polished surfaces, casting soft shadows that danced across the floor, highlighting the dynamic shift in perception, the recalibration of respect, and the acknowledgement that authority in this room was no longer solely determined by title or appearance. Jackson exhaled, slowly, deliberately, and allowed a subtle, measured smile to emerge, his gaze lingering on Maya with a mixture of admiration, reflection, and cautious respect. The room remained still, the faint ambient sounds, the hum of the air conditioning, the soft shuffle of papers, the occasional tap of a pen, underscoring the sustained concentration and the collective awareness of the shift in dynamics. Maya's presence continued to anchor the atmosphere, her calm and precise explanations having reshaped expectations and elevated understanding, the executive's attentiveness now fully aligned with the depth of insight she had revealed. Jackson leaned back slightly, hands clasped loosely, eyes meeting hers once more, the subtle exchange of acknowledgment settling quietly in the room, a silent affirmation that preparation, clarity, and courage had earned their rightful influence, leaving the boardroom poised at the edge of further developments and the promise of consequences that would unfold beyond the walls, the tension of anticipation lingering as the moment held, rich with insight, respect, and the quiet power of unwavering composure. Jackson Hale sat back in his chair, the weight of realization settling heavily on his shoulders, his eyes tracing the intricate lines of the contract once more, absorbing the depth of Maya Williams' analysis with a mixture of awe and reflection. The room around him was silent, every executive frozen in a state of attentive comprehension, pens paused, heads slightly tilted, as if even the air had adjusted to the gravity of the exchange. Maya's posture remained poised, her hands resting lightly on the polished surface of the oak table, fingers tracing gentle, deliberate lines along the margins, a subtle rhythm that mirrored the clarity and precision of her mind. The sunlight from the tall windows cast soft reflections across the marble floors, glinting off the chandelier crystals and illuminating the calm authority in her dark eyes, highlighting the quiet power she carried without a single gesture of arrogance or demand. Jackson's jaw tightened slightly, not in frustration but in concentrated thought, as he ran through the implications of her observations, mentally recalculating risk, accountability, and responsibility in ways he had never anticipated. The executives shifted subtly in their chairs, some leaning forward, others adjusting posture, all drawn into the meticulous exposition Maya provided, each nuance noted, each contingency considered, the collective attention in the room a testament to the influence of competence and composure. Maya's voice remained calm and measured, articulating outcomes, highlighting subtle vulnerabilities, and exploring alternate scenarios with clarity and a rhythm that demanded comprehension, drawing the listeners into a precise understanding of the stakes at hand. Jackson's eyes met hers intermittently, a silent acknowledgment passing between them, the weight of unspoken respect forming in the slight nods and relaxed postures that had replaced the earlier rigidity of the room. The faint hum of the air conditioning, the soft clink of a glass, and the rustle of papers provided a subtle underscore to the concentrated atmosphere, emphasizing the quiet intensity of the moment without breaking its focus. Maya's presence anchored the boardroom, her poised movements, deliberate gestures, and steady gaze fostering an environment where clarity and reason eclipsed hierarchy and assumption, reshaping the energy and focus of everyone present. Jackson exhaled slowly, leaning forward, resting his elbows lightly on the table, contemplating the thoroughness of her insight and the implications for the broader corporate landscape. A subtle shift of recognition, softening his expression as admiration mingled with reflective thought. The executives, attuned to the transformation, absorbed each point with growing understanding, their micro-expressions betraying a mixture of surprise, respect, and consideration, a quiet acknowledgment of the shift in the perception of authority. Maya concluded a final remark, stepping slightly back, maintaining unwavering eye contact with Jackson, her composed confidence radiating throughout the room, and for a moment the space felt suspended, the sunlight glinting across polished surfaces emphasizing the delicate interplay of reflection and shadow that mirrored the transformation of perception and recognition occurring within the boardroom. Jackson's hands unclasped, fingers resting lightly on the table, eyes narrowing thoughtfully as he silently processed the full impact of her insights. The subtle nod he gave passing without words but carrying the weight of acknowledgment. The room remained still, the soft ambient sounds underscoring the sustained focus and awareness of everyone present, each individual internalizing the recalibration of authority, competence, and respect that had quietly unfolded. Maya's calm presence continued to hold sway, her steady voice, precise explanations, and poised demeanor ensuring the depth of her influence remained evident, leaving the boardroom suspended in a moment of reflection, recognition, and anticipation for the consequences and further developments that her insight would inevitably inspire beyond the walls of the meeting. The soft tension in the boardroom remained, but a subtle shift began to emerge as Veronica Ellison, the senior compliance officer, entered quietly, her presence commanding yet understated, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. Maya Williams continued to stand near the polished oak table, her posture poised, dark eyes observing the reactions of the executives as Veronica approached the contract, her silver-streaked hair catching the sunlight filtering through the tall windows, and a faint click of her heels echoed softly on the marble floor, marking the transition from observation to formal acknowledgement. Jackson Hale turned slightly, his brow furrowing with a mixture of anticipation and cautious relief as he recognized the weight of the moment and the significance of Veronica's appearance, understanding that her evaluation would confirm the meticulous insight Maya had provided. Veronica's voice, calm yet deliberate, filled the space with quiet authority as she glanced over the highlighted sections, nodding subtly in recognition of the precision and clarity that had been presented, her eyes meeting Maya's with an unspoken validation that the analysis was correct and thorough. The executives around the room, sensing the importance of this confirmation, leaned forward slightly, their pens paused midair, heads tilted, absorbing the silent acknowledgement that Maya's contribution was not only accurate but critical to the company's understanding of the contract. Maya shifted slightly, maintaining eye contact with Jackson, a subtle movement that conveyed awareness and confidence, her hands brushing lightly against the polished surface, the soft glimmer of sunlight emphasizing her composed presence. Jackson exhaled slowly, his fingers unclasping, and leaned back, processing both the confirmation and the implications for the broader organizational and financial landscape, the faint click of his pen against the table underscoring his contemplative pause. Veronica continued to review, her nods slight, measured, reinforcing the accuracy of Maya's points and highlighting the critical nature of each correction and clarification that had been presented. The room's energy, once dominated by rigid hierarchy and assumption, had evolved into focused attention and quiet respect, each executive internalizing the recalibration of perception and authority without words, their posture reflecting thoughtful acknowledgment rather than formal assertion. Maya's steady gaze, poised stance, and calm voice anchored the moment, her presence a quiet demonstration of knowledge and composure that shifted the room's dynamics subtly but irrevocably. The sunlight reflected off the polished floor and the edges of the contract, casting soft highlights across the room, while Jackson and Veronica exchanged a brief glance, a silent understanding that the situation had been managed with precision, integrity, and foresight. The executives absorbed the final points, leaning slightly as if to better grasp the thoroughness and insight that had emerged from someone previously underestimated. The room now a stage for recognition of competence and preparation rather than mere position or title. Maya stepped back slightly, shoulders squared, eyes meeting Jackson's with quiet assurance, and for a fleeting moment, the room seemed suspended, each individual attuned to the weight of knowledge, authority, and the subtle shift in balance that had quietly taken place. Jackson exhaled again, softer this time, allowing a small, almost imperceptible nod to pass, a silent acknowledgment of the intelligence, preparation, and courage Maya had demonstrated, and the room collectively registered the unspoken truth that competence and clarity could command respect and recalibrate authority without a single overt assertion of power. The hum of the air conditioning, the soft rustle of papers, and the faint clink of glass punctuated the stillness as the executives absorbed the implications, the light from the windows glinting off polished surfaces and reflecting the nuanced recognition that authority and insight often emerge from unexpected sources, leaving the boardroom poised on the edge of unfolding consequences and the promise of further developments beyond the immediate discussion, the atmosphere imbued with reflection, respect, and quiet anticipation for what would follow. The room remained hushed, the polished surfaces reflecting a delicate interplay of sunlight and shadow. As Maya Williams finally stepped back from the oak table, her dark eyes sweeping across the attentive faces of the executives, capturing the full weight of acknowledgment without a word being spoken. Jackson Hale leaned slightly forward in his chair, elbows resting gently on the table, hands unclasped, and his expression softened into quiet reflection, a subtle exhale marking the recognition of insight and courage that had been delivered with calm precision. Veronica Ellison remained near the contract, her silver-streaked hair catching the ambient light as she offered a small, approving nod, her eyes conveying validation and respect for the clarity Maya had brought to the complex agreement. The executives shifted subtly, some leaning back thoughtfully, others adjusting posture with slight nods, and the collective energy of the room transformed into a steady acknowledgment that authority and competence had emerged from preparation, knowledge, and poise rather than mere title or appearance. Maya straightened fully, shoulders squared, hands lightly touching the polished edge of the table, her composed presence anchoring the room, drawing focus without demanding it. And as her gaze met Jackson's, a silent understanding passed between them, a quiet recognition of intellect, courage, and integrity. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, scattering soft reflections across the marble floors and chandelier crystals, highlighting the deliberate movements and measured expressions that defined the moment, each flicker of light echoing the subtle shift in perception that had occurred. Jackson's fingers tapped lightly on the table, a rhythm that mirrored the slow processing of implications, and he finally allowed himself a controlled smile, brief yet genuine, acknowledging both the thoroughness of Maya's analysis and the quiet power with which she had delivered it. The room felt suspended, each executive absorbing the balance of insight, precision, and composure that had quietly reshaped the dynamic. Understanding that true authority often manifests through preparation and clarity rather than formal rank. Maya's posture and calm expression remained steady, her voice now silent, but her influence resonant. Every small gesture, the subtle lift of a hand, the measured step back, the controlled tilt of her head, communicating confidence and control, reinforcing the respect she had earned without a single raised voice or overt assertion. Jackson exhaled once more, allowing the finality of acknowledgment to settle, and the room collectively felt the shift, the subtle energy of recognition, contemplation, and recalibrated perception, creating an atmosphere that was simultaneously reflective and anticipatory, as if the consequences and outcomes of this exchange were only beginning to ripple outward beyond the immediate confines of the boardroom. The executives, pens idle, papers aligned neatly, and postures softened, each silently confirming the transformation, the quiet authority of Maya Williams having established a presence that would linger in the memory and influence of every person in that space. Light continued to dance off surfaces, glinting on the edges of the contract, the polished floors, and the chandelier, emphasizing the composure and clarity that had quietly commanded attention. And as the final moment of this intense exchange stretched, a soft, unspoken acknowledgment filled the room. Integrity, knowledge, and courage could transcend expectation, reshape perception, and quietly recalibrate respect, leaving the boardroom poised at the edge of unfolding developments, the lingering tension carrying the promise of further revelations and the subtle confirmation that one individual's insight could alter the understanding and decisions of even the most powerful.